taking over. We ain't backing down. We ain't giving up no mountains. We ain't giving up no tree. We ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one courage, not a blade of grass. This land is all I know. We gonna make it somehow. We will bend like a bow and never break. Our fathers came here and they lived and died here, and we ain't moving nowhere. Make no mistake, cause we ain't giving up no mountain. We ain't giving up no tree. We ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one courage, not a blade of grass. We love the open country of the Rupununi and the Essequibo, the time when night. Though we may criticize it, this is our home, we love it, and we need to keep it. We have that right. So we ain't giving up no mountain. We ain't giving up no tree. We ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one courage, not a blade of grass. So we ain't giving up no mountains. We ain't giving up no tree. We ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one courage, not a blade of grass. We are a peaceful people. Struggle is we struggle, and we don't look for trouble. Just ask around. But when outside faces from foreign places talk about taking over, we ain't backing down. We ain't giving up no mountains. We ain't giving up no tree. We ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one courage, not a blade of grass. This land is all I know. We gonna make it somehow. We will bend like a bow and never break. Our fathers came here and they lived and died here, and we ain't moving nowhere. Make no mistake, cause we ain't giving up no mountain. We ain't giving up no tree. We ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one courage, not a blade of grass. We love the open country of the Rupununi and the Essequibo, the time when night. Though we may criticize it, this is our home, we love it, and we need to keep it. We have that right. So we ain't giving up no mountain. We ain't giving up no tree. We ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one courage, not a blade of grass. So we ain't giving up no mountains. We ain't giving up no tree. We ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one chorus, not a blade of grass. We are a peaceful people, struggle is we struggle, and we don't look for trouble, just ask around. But when outside faces from foreign places talk about taking over, we ain't backing down. We ain't giving up no mountains, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one chorus, not a blade of grass. This land is all I know. We gonna make it somehow. We will bend like a bow and never break. Our fathers came here and they lived and died here, and we ain't moving nowhere. Make no mistake, 'cause we ain't giving up no mountain, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river.
Everyone, welcome back to the Speakers National Youth Debating Competition 2022, and welcome back from the long Easter break. This morning we watched the West Bank Young Achievers Youth Group compete against the Queenstown Youth Group in the fifth debate of this year's competition. The West Bank Young Achievers Youth Group emerging as the winners this morning. This afternoon, we have two vibrant youth organizations who participated last year. We have the Port Kaituma Youth Group, which is going to be the opposition today, and the Grove Diamond Youth in Development Group, the proposition. And the mood today is prison reform in Guyana is effective. Today, our judges, this afternoon, actually, our judges are Mr. Rian Miller. Mr. Miller is a former youth parliamentarian and best debater of Youth Parliament 2018. He was the senior counsel for the winning team at the CCJ's International Law Mooting Competition 2019, the CCJ being the Caribbean Court of Justice. Mr. Miller holds a Bachelor of Law degree and is currently completing his LEC at the Ewing Law School. He's a member of the Caribbean Airlines Parkside Steel Orchestra and a founder and creative director of Pan Jazz Concert. Our second judge is Mrs. Melissa Dow Richardson, a former alumni of St. Stanislaus College, the University of Guyana, and the University of the West Indies, and the American University of Peace. At these universities, she read for history, law, international relations, and psychology. She is a former multidisciplinary national athlete, table tennis and basketball player, Her sport credentials include Olympic certification in sports administration, World Doping Agency certified doping control officer, and Guyana's first and only level 2 female table tennis coach. With a professional background in journalism, education, international relations, business administration, community development, and coaching, she serves as our Assistant Director of Sport, Ministry of Culture, Youth, and Sport. And our Chief Judge this afternoon is Dr. Valerie Gurusamy Smith, who has been an educator for over 42 years at the primary, secondary, and university levels. She has been a CXC, English A and B, and mathematics teacher for more than 35 years. An English lecturer at UG for more than 20 years. Dr. Gurusamy Smith is the director of the Berea College, Royal College International, and she is also in the pastoral ministry for more than 21 years. She's a two-time winner of the University of Guyana's Interfaculty Debating Competition and the founder and coach of the course Mastering the Art of Public Speaking. Those are our three judges today for this sixth debate in the 2022 Speakers National Youth Debating Competition. This afternoon, the proposing team, as I mentioned earlier, is the Grove Diamond Youth in Development Youth Group. This youth group was established in 2009. The founders at the time focused on assisting youth, especially those who left school before graduation and the less fortunate in the Grove Diamond community area by creating activities that will equip and enhance their skills to help themselves as well as others. They have about 25 members, and they're always involved in assisting, especially in charitable work. Their first speaker today is Ms. Bibi Yassin, and Bibi has won quite a few of the Best Debater title during the last competition. She's 22 years old, from Luziknan, but she works in Grove Diamond. Second speaker is Mr. Naresh Sugrim, 22 years old, from Herstelling on East Bank, and joining the team this year is Ms. Tamira Reddy, 22 years old, from Craig Village. The opposing team is the Port Kaituma Youth Group. The Port Kaituma Youth Group was established in 2019. The group's motto is creating a conducive environment for healthy social interaction among our youth. The group consists of 37 members from the ages of 13 to 32, and its main activities include group talks, sport, cleanup campaign, and charitable works. The president, Mr. Donald Richards, is a resident of Port Kaituma from birth, an agricultural science teacher at the Port Kaituma School. Their first speaker is Mr. Leon Beaton, 25 years old, from Pittsburgh, Port Kaituma. The second speaker, Ms. Lochini Danraj, 29 years old, from Pittsburgh also. And the third speaker, Donald Richards himself, 23 years old, from Pittsburgh. The mood today: prison reform in Guyana is effective. I now declare this debate open and call on the first speaker from the Grove Diamond Youth in Development Group, Ms. Bibi Yassin, to make her presentation. Bibi, the floor is yours.
Prison was an opportunity to change the direction of my reality that prison reform in Guyana is effective. Impartial judges, before we remove the shackles, permit me to define the key terms of the move. They are prison reform and effective. According to Hobbs Law July 2021, prison reform is defined as the attempt to improve prison conditions and to improve the effectiveness of a penal system. According to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary revised in 2020, effective is defined as producing a positive result. Considering the definition of the pertinent terms, we redefine the move to mean, and I quote, the changes and improvements intended to better the lives of prisoners in Guyana are producing positive results, unquote. Impartial judges, our team refuse to sit and be victims of the stigma that prison reform in Guyana is ineffective. With that being said, I, Bibi Yassin, will open the gates and walk you through the highly functioning systems currently in place at our prison. Our second speaker, Narish Sabrim, will push open the doors, revealing the effectiveness of these systems. Our final speaker, Tamira Reddy, will shatter the existing stigma of prison reform. Wise opposition. The facts that I now present to you here today did not stem from us sitting on our laurels, but rather from a fruitful first-hand discussion with the acting director of prisons himself, Mr. Nicola Elliott, and the officer in charge of prisoners' welfare and corrections, Mrs. Bristol Wright. Sagacious judges, members of the opposition, prison as a penal system is a belief of the past. Today in Guyana, we have anger management and conflict regulation programs, mental health, drug rehabilitation, and counseling services, skills training offered in welding, farming, carpentry, etc., literacy and numeracy programs, and even to CXC. According to Mrs. Grant, these programs are being certified by reputable institutions, including the Guyana School of Agriculture, the Board of Industrial Training, the Kuru Training College, and even Carnegie. Lord Opposition, these are not wishy-washy programs, but they are certified programs. She also informed us, as of last year, 860 prisoners successfully completed the literacy programs offered. Honorable judges, with plans for expansion, 1,400 prisoners will be accessing these programs this year. Lord Opposition, plans for expansion simply tells us all that the system is working. Wise Opposition, on the point of expansion, allow me to edify that last year, $20 million was budgeted for the expansion of prison reform system. This year, a whopping $48.9 million was budgeted, and this is more than 100% increase. Educated opposition, would you invest into a failing system with more than 100% increase? Come on, members, this is not rocket science. This system simply works. Honorable judges, let us all not forget, Guyana has been a member of the United Nations as of the year 1966. And according to the UN, and I quote, prison reform is necessary to ensure that the human rights of prisoners are protected, unquote. Members of the opposition, let us not be internet explorers, but let us dive into the records that proves prison reform is effective. I thank you.
Thank you very much for Speaker Bibi Yassin from the Grove Diamond Youth in Development Group. The first speaker for the opposing team, is Mr. Leon Beaton of the Port Kaituma Youth Group. Mr. Beaton, the floor is yours.
Greetings, everyone. I, Leon Beaton, come before you with confidence as the first speaker of the opposition to disagree with the mood that states, and I quote, prison reform is effective in Guyana, end of quote. Qualified judges, members of the opposition, viewers of this debate, permit me to make our stance a bit clearer by defining the key terms in the book. The United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime defines prison reform as, and I quote, prison reform is the attempt to improve conditions inside prisons, improve the effectiveness of the penal system, or implement alternatives to incarceration. It also focuses on ensuring the reinstatement of those lives who are impacted by crimes, end of quote. The Oxford English Dictionary defines effective as, and I quote, successfully producing a desired or intended outcome, end of quote. Now, with these definitions in mind, we therefore interpret the book to mean that the conditions inside Guyana's prison, along with its penal system, fulfill its aim of ensuring those persons who leave prisons become law-abiding and productive citizens. However, we, the opposition, are here to challenge this move and show you that prison reform in Guyana is not effective. Now, before I dive into my argument, allow me to highlight the structure of my team's presentation. I, the first speaker, will examine the implementation of the prison reform strategy in Guyana. My second speaker will continue from my points and expound on the ineffectiveness of the penal system in Guyana. And our third speaker will give details about recidivism and life after being incarcerated. Now, the United Nations, through its Office of Drugs and Crime, has a multidisciplinary approach to prison reform strategy. Now, this approach takes into consideration life in prison, punishment attached to various crimes, and how police carry out their mandates. Now, this proven strategy by the UN posited that overcrowding in prisons compromises the provision and effectiveness of educational, vocational training and rehabilitation programs in prison. Now, according to Gladwin Samuels, who was the prison director in 2020, he said that Guyana's prison can currently hold 923 prisoners. However, the population of the prisons in Guyana is 1,884, which is 961 over the capacity. Attentive judges, learned proposition. Did you hear me? 961 over the capacity. This is an alarming 51%. Now, in local terms, we would say the prisoners pack up like sardines. Now, how effective will any program be with a staggering 51% overcrowding at our prisons? Now, let me provide you some scope with how the overcrowding in Guyana's prisons can diminish the effectiveness of any well-structured program, prison reform program. Now, some of these programs will include, as the fourth speaker mentioned, psychiatric intervention, skills training, vocational skills training, and behavior modification programs. However, let me draw your attention to the psychiatric intervention and behavior modification programs. Now, both of these programs require the services of trained and professional psychologists, psychiatrists, and other mental health professionals. Now, according to the Mental Health Unit Director, Dr. Util Thomas, the Georgetown Public Hospital Psychiatric Clinic sees approximately 25 prisoners weekly for various mental health conditions. Now, 25 prisoners weekly accounts for only 1.3% of the prison population. And if you do the math, and even if half of the prison population access this psychological help, then each prisoner will visit the clinic once every 9 months. Now, members of the proposition, how effective can this be? How do we expect hardcore criminals to change mentally and behaviorally if they cannot access the psychosocial support that they so desperately need? Now, there's a Guyanese saying that goes like this: you can take a rat from the gutter, but you can't take the gutter from the rat. However, when adequate and appropriate interventions are administered, Only then can meaningful and long-lasting change be made. Now to conclude, based on the statistics and reports cited earlier about the Guyana's prison service, we can clearly see, based on this aspect alone, prison reform in Guyana is not effective. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leon. Our second speaker, Mr. Naresh Singh, for the proposition Grove Diamond Youth in Development Youth Group. Mr. Singh. Okay, we don't have your sound. Hold, you have to restart, Mr. Sugar. We have a problem with the audio. Just keep talking. Can you unmute? Okay. Okay, hold on a second, Mr. Sugam.
Honorable Speaker, erudite judges, wise opposition, good afternoon. I rise as the second speaker of the proposition to push open the doors, revealing how effective prison reform systems are in Guyana. Members of the opposition, how does one measure effectiveness? Well, according to the acting director of prison services, Mr. Nicholas Elliott, and I quote, the effectiveness of prison reform is measured by calculating the remittance rate, prisoners discharged, and the number of incidents per. As a matter of fact, the remittance rate of prisoners decreased from 13% in 2020 to 9% in 2021. 9%. While the number of incidents decreased by over 50%, unquote. Impartial judges, colleagues on the opposite side. This means that 91% of persons were successfully reformed and reintegrated into society to contribute positively. If 91% doesn't scream effective, then we are dumb beasts. Honorable judges, honorable judges, permit me to expound what this success rate means for a convicted criminal, Jaisaran Rajaram, who saw prison as an opportunity to change the direction of his life. He was convicted in 2006 and sentenced to prison for 12 years. While Mr. Rajaram was accommodated in the Mataruni prison, he was exposed to the numerous training programs mentioned by my first speaker. And he enrolled in several of them, including welding, carpentry, masonry, and farming. After excelling in behavioral management programs, Mr. Rajaram was able to apply for early release, and parole was granted, reducing his sentence by over 6 years. Today, Jaisaram Rajaram is fully employed by the Grove Diamond Neighborhood Democratic Council for 4 years and utilizing the very skills that was taught to him during his incarceration to contribute positively to his community. This is one of the many success stories of effectiveness of prison reform in Guyana. Members of the opposition, how? How can we ignore these stories and tell such untruth about a functioning system? According to Mr. Elliott, and I quote, with the implementation of these reform programs, which runs for about 12 weeks and incorporates assessment before and after, have reduced the incident from 200 in 2020 to 100 in 2021, unquote. Certificates, changing behavior, reduced sentencing, and money. Yes, money. Wise opposition, certified prisoners can access jobs while serving their sentences using the very skills taught to earn financially. These monies can go to their families or to their savings to access once discharged. This is a working system which shows how prisoners are able to move through prison reform and become better individuals. Honorable judges, according to the Minister of Home Affairs, Honorable Robson Ben, in an article published by Picture News in November 2021, revealed the plans for the construction of a multifaceted school adolescent non-prisoners, to expand the training programs offered to prisoners so that they can reap the benefits and contribute positively to society. Members of the opposition, this infrastructural expansion is in keeping with the UN regulations, which is to ensure that the human rights of prisoners are protected and the prospects for social reintegration is increased. Impartial judges, well-educated opposition, viewers all, the system is simply effective. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sugrim. And now, for the third speaker of the Port Kaituma Youth Group, Ms. Lochani Dhanraj. Lochani, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. I, Lochani Dhanraj, second speaker of the opposition, stand confidently before you to refute the move which states, and I quote, "Prison reform in Guyana is effective," end of quote. My presentation will continue from where my first speaker concluded and will also examine the ineffectiveness of the penal system in Guyana. Impartial judges, colleagues on the proposition, and honorable speaker. Prison reform requires a conducive environment that will facilitate structured programs which will assist in the preparation of prisoners for reintegration into society. As a matter of fact, Gladwin Samuels, the former director of prisons in 2019 said, and I quote, "Due to the mostly poor conditions within prisons and the lack of sufficient opportunities for change, most inmates will return to society hardened, having been exposed to an environment dominated by more experienced criminals," end of quote. So tell me, if the former director of prisons is convinced that the environment of the prisons in Guyana is not only ineffective for any sort of reform, but it also contributes to strengthening the criminal tendencies of the prisoners, then who are we to disagree with the previous director of prisons? Further, in addition to the conditions inside the prisons, prison reform also includes the effectiveness of the penal system. According to a 2021 report by the Innovative Prison System, and I quote, "In Guyana, judges and magistrates hardly use probation and community service as an alternative to custodial sentences and pretrial detention. This is because they lack confidence in the effectiveness of the probation service to provide an efficient supervision of offenders," end of quote. Earlier, my first speaker cited the UN's prison reform strategy, which stated that there should be alternative punishments rather than imprisonment for certain crimes. Now, if our judges and magistrates lack faith in the probational services in Guyana, which provides these alternative punishments, then which portion of Guyana's prison reform is effective? It is definitely not the programs and conditions of the prison as my first speaker demonstrated, nor is it the penal system. To add, our president, Dr. Irfan Ali, said very passionately in a live broadcast in November 2021 that in the year 2022, this year, the government will launch a program that will target criminals, giving them a chance to change and reform their lives. Tell me, brilliant members of the proposition, doesn't a new program imply that the current one is not good enough? In other words, the current prison reform system in Guyana is ineffective and therefore needs a complete overhaul or replacement. If the commander of the armed forces is passionately saying we need a new program, then why are you still continuing this argument to say that prison reform in Guyana is effective? If that is not convincing enough, then let me enlighten you on what the Attorney General, Mr. Anil Nandlal, said in January this year, and I quote, "The justice system in Guyana is expected to drastically improve with the introduction of sentencing guidelines," end of quote. To our members of the proposition, we have presented the reality of Guyana's prison reform system. Do the smart and agree with us. Prison reform in Guyana is not effective. Thank you.
And thank you, Ms. Dhanraj. The third speaker for the proposition is Ms. Tamara Reddy. from the Grove Diamond Youth in Development Youth Group. Miss Reddy, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. All protocols observed. As aforementioned by our first speaker, ITMA Ready will shatter the existing stigma of prison reform here in Guyana. Impartial judges, attentive audience, for a long time now, we have been allowing persons to waltz in and undermine the progress we make as a country. No more will we allow our own people to subvert our working efforts. It is absurd for anyone to say that prison reform in Guyana is ineffective when, as mentioned by our second speaker, there is a 91% success rate from the reform system. Yes, 91%. By now, the audience is quite convinced that the opposing team is just trying to thwart the obvious evidence. Nevertheless, it is important that the people become fully aware. Allow me to ask, are prisoners aliens? No, they're human beings, just like you and me. Hence, they deserve a second chance, which is why the Minister of Home Affairs, Honorable Robeson-Ben, launched the Fresh Start Initiative, of which inmates, when released, are given kits to start over. Furthermore, according to Mrs. Grant, Chief Welfare Officer of Prisoners, she added, quote unquote, there's an annual exhibition that allows prisoners or inmates to display their own creations, which are stemmed from the very programs. She further stated, quote unquote, that the Human Rights Service even pledged to and are providing night shelters for persons who make it out of prison without a place to reside. Compassionate audience. Just last Wednesday, my team and I witnessed a grand spelling bee competition at the Lusignan prison, where prisoners exhibited their skills obtained from the literacy programs offered. And these are only a few of our country's working efforts. The members of the opposition may want to get somewhat technical. Fine, let's get technical. The MOOC states that prison reform is effective, yet 91% success rate screams very effective. Opposition, you would agree with me that this is an argument of transparency and, most importantly, honesty. Then be honest with yourselves and give Jack his jacket. Prison reform in Guyana is working because our government is going not one, but 1,000 extra miles to better the reform system. It is working because there is a 91% success rate. And don't you worry about that extra 9%. They'll have yet another chance in the reform system. It is working because budget allocation more than doubled this year for prison reform. It is working because the incidence rate in prison lowered over 50%. And it's working because we have so many Rajorans reintegrated into society and positively contributing. Finally, it is working because the penal system alone was never. Honorable judges, prison reform entails more than what we've mentioned here today. From legal aid, health, straight to alternatives to incarceration. But 30 minutes cannot do justice. Audience, we bring you nothing but the truth from the current acting director of prisons himself. And yes, the truth does hurt, but we can learn to embrace it. Embrace that prison reform in Guyana is simply effective. I thank you.
That was Miss Tamara Reddy from the Grove Diamond Youth in Development Youth Group. And the final speaker for the opposition is Mr. Donald Richards, Port Kaituma Youth Group. Donald?
Good afternoon, everyone. I, Donald Richards, third speaker of the opposition, stand boldly before you to conclude my team's argument, which is in disagreement with the mood, which states, and I quote, prison reform in Guyana is effective. End of quote. My first speaker presented the state of the prison reform program in Guyana is prison. My second speaker examined the facts surrounding the ineffectiveness of the penal system, which is also a part of prison reform. I will now enlighten you on recidivism and life after prison. Before I move on, to make my argument clearer, allow me to define recidivism. According to the National Institute of Justice, recidivism refers to a person relapse into criminal behavior, often after that person received sanction or undergoes intervention for a previous crime. A report presented by the Inter-American Development Bank shows that from the year 2016 to 2019, the recidivism rate was 35%. This means that 35% of criminals who were released into society repeated a crime and were once again incarcerated. The prison reform program is meant to refine perpetrators and reintegrate them into society as meaningful and productive citizens. Lord members of the proposition, how can you argue that Guyana prison reform is effective when 35% of criminals are repeating the same crime even after reform and release into society? Critical thinkers of the proposition, let me ask you this. If you had a business and a prospective employee came to you with a history of being charged for robbery, theft, fraud, or any type of violence, would you hire that person without thinking twice? I think not. This is the statement that previously convicted felons face after trying to live normal life after being released from prison. Michael Kingston, the acting crime chief in 2019, advised at a press conference that, and I quote, employers need to take extra precautionary measures to ensure that they do not hire criminal-minded individuals. End of quote. If the former crime chief provided this advice, then what does that tell you about his trust in the effectiveness of the Guyana prison reform system? To conclude our argument, allow me to summarize the points put forward by my team members and I. Prison reform is not a one-way street. It involves a multidisciplinary approach that includes the effectiveness of the penal system, the physical settings, physical facilities in the prison itself, psychosocial support, and proficient integration to society after being released from prison. Based on the evidence provided by my team member, we stand firm in disagreement with the mood and conclude that prison reform is not effective. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Donald. And there you have it. The two groups, the six presenters for the sixth debate in this second National Youth Debating Competition. The two groups being the Port Kaituma Youth Group and the Grove Diamond Youth in Development Youth Group. Our two groups are now going to gather their thoughts for the rebuttal. They're going to prepare themselves in the next few minutes and come back to us with their rebuttals, being led by Leon Beaton, the opposition, Port Kaituma Youth Group, and Ms. Bibi Yassin, Grove Diamond Youth in Development. But let us hear from our public relations officer, Mr. Yannick December, on the rules of this competition. Yannick?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The rules of the competition are as follows. Each team must consist of only 3 members, all from the same youth group. Failure to comply will result in the disqualification of the team. Once a team has started the competition, no member shall be replaced. The first speaker will be the first speaker of the proposition, followed by the first speaker of the opposition, and shall alternate in this order. The time allotted for each speaker are as follows. First speaker, 5 minutes. Second speaker, 4 minutes. Third speaker, 4 minutes. And for the rebuttal, 5 minutes. The rebuttal will be done by the first speaker on each team, in the order of opposing, then proposing. No new arguments or material shall be introduced into the rebuttal. 10 points will be deducted for introduction of new arguments. A bell will be rung first to indicate that the speaker should commence. The second bell will indicate that 1 minute is remaining, and there will be a final bell when the time has elapsed. 5 points will be deducted from each speaker who does not adhere to the allotted time. In the event of technical difficulties, a speaker may be allotted additional time. This is at the discretion of the judges. Speakers may refer to notes but should not read them. 5 points will be deducted from any speaker who reads a prepared speech. Points will be awarded for reasoning and logic, originality, relevance, mechanics, articulation, attitude to opponent, development of argument, and cohesion. And finally, the judges' decisions are final. Those are your rules for this year's Speakers National Youth Debating Competition. Best of luck to our participants. Mr. Speaker.
The debate is being keenly followed on social media. I see both sides have their members blogging for them. Keisha Albert says, great job, Port Kaituma Youth Group. Great references and time management. Ms. Valesis Edwards says, great job. Stacy Conway, rooting for Port Kaituma. Ashana Ryan also. Malika Russell says, good luck to both teams. Calvin Roberts, again, hailing both teams. Chano Diodat, urging on Region 1 team. Donella Wolford is backing Devika, Danraj, and Leon Beaton all the way. So there you have it, some of the comments on social media. We have just another minute to go before the contestants come back with their rebuttals. Today we have the Grove Diamond Youth and Development Youth Group, the runners up from last year's competition, against the Port Kaituma Youth Group. Their distinction being eliminating the University of Guyana Student Society in the first round of last year's competition. So these are two very, very good groups, and we have had a great debate from them so far. Are we ready for the rebuttals? In 30 seconds, our timekeeper says. So, shortly we are going to be seeing the Port Kaituma Youth Group with the rebuttal for the opposition. And Bibi Yassin will be the person rebutting for the proposition, the Grove Diamond Youth in Development Youth Group. We are back. Port Kaituma. There is Mr. Beaton, and let us get Mr. Beaton started. Mr. Beaton, you have the floor at 2:47.
Good afternoon once again. Impartial judges, members of the proposing team, I stand before you once more to defend my team's position and disprove the arguments put forward by any proposition, all of which states, and I quote, prison reform in Guyana is effective. End of quote. Now, we in proposition strongly believe and have evidence to support that prison reform in Guyana is not effective. But before I speak up, cited that there in the budget we have 48.9 million budgeted for prison reform. He said this was a 100% increase from the previous budget. Now, why would we increase the budget for a prison reform program that is so effective? Why is there so much money? Now, when they said that this budget, this was 48.9%, also had plans to expand prisons. Now, the expansion of prison, is not a way to reform, but we're just providing extra accommodation for more prisoners. If we are preparing for more prisoners, that means the current reform program is not working. No. The second speaker cited that the recidivism rate moved from 13% to 9% from in 2020 to 2021. Now, calculating the recidivism rate for 1 year will not effectively that does not determine the effectiveness, that will not effectively determine how successful the prison reform program is. Now, we cited an article that said that the recidivism rate from 2016 to 2019 was 35%, and this recidivism rate was over a period of 4 years, which gives you a better scope of how the prisoners operate after they are released to society. Now, the second speaker also cited that Mr. Ramjohn was lucky enough to get a job at the Neighborhood Democratic Council. But sadly, not everybody is lucky like Mr. Ramjohn, because according to the acting crime chief in 2020, he said that employers should guard themselves against hiring criminal-minded individuals. So the other persons who are not as lucky as Ramjohn will find it hard to get jobs because of this advice from the crime chief, who is a person that is associated with prison and prison reform. So if he doesn't trust the system and he is telling employers not to hire persons who leave prison, why should employers hire persons who leave prison? Now, the third speaker said that prisoners deserve a second chance. Indeed, we agree that prisoners deserve a second chance. And he said that, yeah, we agree that prisoners deserve a second chance. However, because according to the UN, overcrowding in prisons diminish the effectiveness of any well-structured program. We have an overcrowding rate of 51%. So we cannot put back persons into society, persons who do not get the necessary psychosocial support from professionals, from the mental health professionals and so on. Now, programs. Now, the third speaker also said that the government is going 1,000 extra miles to improve prison reform. Now, why are they going to work 1,000 extra miles if the prison reform is effective? Even the president said that they will introduce a new program, not a program to help build up the one that we have. They will introduce a new one that will see a complete overhaul of the current one that we have. Even the Attorney General, the Honorable Nandalal, said that the penal system will drastically improve. Not improve by a little bit, but it will drastically improve with the introduction of sentencing guidelines. So to conclude my team's final presentation, we once again implore you to accept the facts that we have presented. The staggering rate of 51% overcrowding at our prisons will undoubtedly diminish the effectiveness of any prison reform program. The benefits will definitely not be realized, and if these programs are not administered in the prescribed manner. Lastly, without the relevant and adequate psychosocial support, the rate of recidivism will remain constant and even increase. Now, dear proposition, we once again request you that you open your eyes and accept reality that prison reform in Guyana is not effective. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leon. And now for Ms. Bibi Yassin for the proposition, Grove Diamond Youth in Development Youth Group. Bibi?
Honorable Speaker, impartial judges, audience, all good afternoon. I rise this time to reiterate the reality which our team brought to light this afternoon, and that is prison reform in Guyana is effective. With that being said, allow me to restate our team's contribution, which lifts the bar and exposes the reality that prison reform in Guyana is effective. A comprehensive certified program not only caters for rehabilitation, but also provides prisoners with the opportunity to learn new skills which they can use after being dismissed. Plans for expansion. With this, budget allocation this year was $48.9 million, and this was double last year allocation. And this is because the effectiveness of the system is showing, hence, the remittance rate decreased from 13% to 9%. Incident rate decreased over 50%. 91% of prisoners successfully reformed. Decreased sentencing for Mr. Rajaram by 6 years. Multifaceted school at the Louisiana prison, which will offer training programs to prisoners. And finally, the reality, which is Guyana is keeping in line with the U.S. regulation as it relates to the human rights of prisoners. Honorable judges, I will now utilize the negative contributions made by the members of the opposition. Honorable judges, the first speaker of the opposition stood boldly to utter the untruth of the prison reform in Guyana. The member made reference to the data provided by the Director of Prison Services in the year 2020. Come on, member. How can you say that the prison reform is ineffective based on data from the year 2020? We are currently living in 2022. Come to life, member. Members, wake up. We are all in 2022. And according to the records, the current acting director of prison services, Mr. Nicolon Elliott, is echoing the effectiveness of the prison reform. And this effectiveness leads to expansion. And that was covered in the debate with our speaker's presentation. The member then mentioned the overcrowding of prisoners. However, honorable judges, overcrowding does not occur due to ineffectiveness of prison reform. The data my second speaker would have provided showed 91% success rate of prisoners reformed, and only a mere 9% who has to undergo the prison reform system for a second chance. Then how can we say this is overcrowded? Members, are we saying 91% is considered ineffective? Then we are dumb beasts. Honorable judges, the second speaker asked the question, why disagree with the former director of prison services? But may I inform that member, we're in 2022 and there is a current acting director in charge of the prison services who reveals the data that the prison reform is effective, and this, my friend, is coming from the horse's mouth. The member also asks, which portion of the prison reform is effective? Then member, you clearly was not listening to our presentation. She also mentioned in the year 2021 that the president of Guyana was hinting of launching programs. However, wise member, kindly wake up. The Fresh Start Initiative program was already launched and we are in 2022, and this is helping prisoners. Honorable Speaker, the third speaker mentioned that life after prison. May I remind you, Mr. Rajaram is fully employed. Honorable judges, we remove the shackles and we humbly ask the members of the proposition to commend our country's work and effort and celebrate the prison reform in Guyana. Why we must celebrate it? Because it is working. It is effective. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Yassin. And there you have it. All 8 presentations from our 2 groups, the Port Kaituma Youth Group and the Grove Diamond Youth in Development Group, debating the moot prison reform in Guyana is effective. Our judges are now busy tallying their scores, and shortly we'll be bringing them live to give us the results. Those judges are for this afternoon's debate, Mr. Rion Miller, who himself is a former youth parliamentarian and best debater of Youth Parliament 2018. He is also the senior counsel for the winning team at the Caribbean Court of Justice International Law Mooting Competition 2019. Holds a Bachelor's of Law degree and is currently completing his legal education at the U Wooding Law School. Our next judge is Ms. Melissa Dow Richardson. She is our Assistant Director of Sport at the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sport. She is a multidisciplinary national athlete, being on our national team in table tennis and basketball. She is a World Anti-Doping Certified Officer, a Level 2 table tennis coach, the first female Level 2 table tennis coach. And she has read for degrees in history, law, international relations, and psychology at the University of Guyana, the University of the West Indies, and the American University of Peace Studies. Our chief judge this afternoon is Dr. Valerie Gurasamy Smith, who herself has been an educator for 42 years at all levels of education, primary, secondary, and tertiary. She has also been twice winner of the University of Guyana Interfaculty Debating Competition. She's a founder and coach of the course Mastering the Art of Public Speaking. Dr. Valerie Gurasamy Smith. Today, we had earlier today the Young Achievers Youth Group, West Bank Demerara, against the Queenstown Youth Group, and the West Bank Young Achievers Youth Group came out victorious. That's earlier this morning. This afternoon, it's the Grove Diamond Youth in Development. The proposition for the moot prison effective in Guyana, prison reform in Guyana is effective, and the opposition was the Port Kaituma Youth Group. Those were our two groups. Our judges continue to deliberate, and shortly we will hear from them. This is the 2022 Speakers National Youth Debating Competition. Debate number 6 in the first round of the competition. 2 debates left, and then we will have 8 winners advancing into the quarterfinals with 4 matches to go. Last year, we had 16 groups. This year, 16 groups also. A new group this year is the Bartica Youth Group, which is replacing one of the other groups who could not have participated this year for one reason or another. So Bartica came in. We have representation from every region except Region 9, and hopefully next year Region 9 will be able to join the competition. The judges are having a very difficult time this afternoon. 2 very, very powerful groups, all winners last year. The Grove Diamond Youth and Development Group was the runner-up last year, so they went all the way to the finals. And the Port Kaituma Youth Group had the distinction of beating the UGSS in the first round last year. So, yes, two very, very aggressive, powerful, and good teams this afternoon. And they have our judges um, engage in intense discussion so we can expect another very close match. As we had this morning, the scores were 264 for the West Bank Young Achievers Youth Group and 260 for the Queenstown Youth Group. So yes, it is a keenly contested competition this year, and today is yet another example of that keen competition. Now I see the judges have pulled out the calculator again. So they're crunching there the numbers, recording. The two groups this afternoon that are keeping the judges so busy are the Port Kaituma Youth Group, which was the opposition this afternoon, and the Grove Diamond Youth and Development Youth Group, the proposition, debating the moot prison reform in Guyana is effective. So this is very keen. I'm observing the judges, papers turning, pencils and pens touching paper, and 6 nervous young persons on our screen in front of me. The 6 persons today: Bibi Yassin, the first presenter for the Grove Diamond Group; Leon Beaton, first presenter for the Port Kaituma Group; Naris Sugrim, Grove Diamond Youth Group second presenter; Lochini Danraj, Port Kaituma Youth Group second presenter; Tamira Reddy from the Grove Diamond Youth and Development Group, the third speaker; and Donald Richards, the Port Kaituma Youth Group. Those were our 6 presenters, all 6 on screen, very nervous, palms sweating, feet jiggling, nervous. They call it restless feet syndrome. Yes. And the judges still cannot decide. Did we ever have a tie in a debating competition? This might be the first time for a tie. Yes. Yes. Debate number 6 in the first round, and I see some judges who are now relaxed. Rion, maybe you can tell us why it was so keen. Judge Miller.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to say that this has perhaps been the hardest debate in the 2 years that I've ever had to judge, particularly because both sides were well prepared. So I'd like you to give a round of applause for yourselves. Both sides did very well, and it was very difficult for us to judge. You didn't give away a lot of points, but some of the things I had to note, the arguments were relevant. You can tell it was well researched. Everyone went to their sources. It was well structured. I see the teams took the advice from the last debate. In the arguments were articulate. We saw the theatrics from both sides. Members brought out their A games. They were keen, especially inside of the rebuttal, to listen to the other person's arguments and to competently rebut it. It was very close, I can say that. But in terms of points to note, there was some listing from the proposition in terms of the measures of prison reform, but what I wanted to hear more of was not just the measures, but how effective the measures are. So we know that prison reform is a spectrum. It has legal aid, it has health, it has a lot of components, but we wanted to see more. At least I wanted to see more of how that reform was effective, focusing on the final aspect of the moot topic, prison reform in Guyana is effective. In terms of the opposition, I saw both teams did this, and I just wanted to comment on it. Even though the office of the director of prisons is very esteemed and he is in direct contact with the prison themselves, I don't think he's a competent authority to adjudicate on the efficiency of prison reform. It's kind of like writing a test and marking your own paper, but an independent source, reliance on an independent source would have been better. I noticed both sides use quotes from current and previous directors, but it would have been better to go to an independent source to bolster your arguments. But at some points, some of the shallow points in both sides left us begging the question. It's kind of like if the supposition supported the conclusion. So if you're going to make a point inside of your argument, be sure to conclude on what you want us to draw from it and don't just leave it hanging inside of the air. Because there's a lot of statistics, there was a lot of quotations, a lot of deduction done, but conclude on the point that you want to make and don't just leave the facts and your analysis there just hanging inside of the air. A little more emphasis could have been placed in the rebuttal. I picked up some points that I thought each other side would have capitalized on. So I would advise you to be keen while others are presenting to listen more to the rebuttal, listen more to the arguments that they're presenting so that you can have more points for your rebuttal and it can be a bit stronger. But like I said, all in all, I think it was a very good attempt by both teams. And I give both of you a round of applause. It was very close, so congratulations.
Thank you, Judge Miller. And now for Judge Dow Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon to everyone tuned in. Good afternoon to our Parliament staff, fellow judges, and to the two debating teams from Grove Diamond and Port Kaituma. I would like to commend both teams for their debates this afternoon. Very, very strong evidence of research, not just primary and secondary source documents, but you did interviews, you referenced newspaper articles, and I want to highly commend the references to the international guidelines, the United Nations documents. As a member of the United Nations, Guyana has a very powerful role to play, and the fact that you've taken us to the high point of the discussion on this particular issue by citing the United Nations documents is something that I want to encourage other teams to do. By and large, the presentation, the diction was strong, your expression was strong, your articulation was strong, and I think that these two debating teams this afternoon really showcases what our Guyanese youth are capable of intellectually, academically. I mean, it's many times we find fault, we have criticisms, and those are there, and we've gotten very strong feedback from Judge Miller on that. But I want to take this opportunity to just commend and compliment and congratulate our Guyanese youth. The two themes are a good representation of who we are in Guyana. Mr. Speaker, these are my comments this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. And now for our Chief Judge, Dr. Valerie Gurasamy-Smith.
Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon, all in Parliament and all viewing. This very, very intellectually endowed debating competition. I believe since I've been sitting as a judge in these competitions, indeed, I had to keep up with the points. I had to keep up with both teams. And when two debating teams can keep you so engaged from beginning to end, you know that you are truly, truly witnessing an intellectual output of young people who really went to work. So I really want to say that both teams did very well. They integrated debating skills. They integrated multiple instruments of research, and that was really good. They had data, they had statistical proof. There are times when their statistics did not get the full acknowledgement as a source, but overlooking that, other examples, other evidence that they've drawn were well authenticated. And this debating competition today that says prison reform in Guyana is effective has truly engaged us. And we indeed, I do not want to say it was a difficult time we had, but the three judges, we all came very, very close with our numbers and our percentages. And therefore, this afternoon, I would like us to give a rousing round of applause for two debating teams that truly did the work. Coming out as best speaker, all the speakers did speak well. All the speakers tried their best to engage public speaking skills, but coming out on top is no other than Ms. Bibi Yassin from the proposing team. As best speaker, Ms. Bibi Yassin. The scores came very close, and you would be surprised to hear the score. The scores read 95.7 and 95.6.
Do we have to call in the auditors?
And you know, one of our judges is saying, I forgot my point one. We tried our best to see that we are truly being just judges. So this afternoon, the win goes to no other than the proposing team, Grove. Grove Diamond, youths in development, but understand the win is by a 0.1. Never happened in the history of my being a judge. Excellent job, excellent job. One rousing round of applause in the parliament and out of parliament. Excellent job.
Thank you very much, judges. Congratulations to both teams. And we saw it with the judges here, being in front of them, pulling out the hardware and also the software to determine the fine point, the 0.1 difference between the two teams. Port Kaituma, once again, you've done exceedingly well. Keep up the very good work. I'm sure we're going to hear much of you later in the year. We do have the Youth Parliament coming up. Congratulations to you. Grove Diamond Youth in Development, congratulations once again. You really got in by the skin of, So congratulations, Bibi, congratulations, Grove Diamond, and on to the next round. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much.